back to this vitamin K rich foods. So our blood thinning medications like Coumadin or warfarin, that is working to thin the blood. And then foods that are rich in vitamin K, you know that one of the functions of vitamin K is to promote clotting. So you can see that antagonist relationship there. So if they're being prescribed a medicine to thin their blood to decrease their risk for future strokes or a blood clot, if they're eating foods that are high in vitamin K, that's working against it. So patients that are on a blood thinning medication have a bleeding time or a PT time drawn, a lab drawn that shows how their blood is flowing. Okay. If they've recently eaten a lot of foods that are high in vitamin K, then their prescription will be adjusted for the blood thinning medication. But let's say they go and no longer eat those vitamin K rich foods. So now they're on a prescription that doesn't really match what their lifestyle is. So we want to talk to folks about maintaining a consistent amount of vitamin K rich foods. So for instance, if I have a lot of kale in my garden and I'm taking a blood thinner, I need to eat a consistent amount of that kale. I don't want to have 3 days of kale smoothies and kale salads and then 2 weeks of nothing with the kale because that will affect the bleeding time. Up here we have a medication called a diuretic, and the name is furosemide. And because it's a diuretic, it's pulling fluid out of the patient's body. It is prescribed oftentimes for an antihypertensive. And while it's pulling fluid out, which is a good thing so that the heart isn't having to work as hard to pump through all that fluid, it's also leaching our body of potassium. So oftentimes folks on the medication furosemide will need a potassium supplement or education from us on foods that are high in potassium. Next, we have prednisone, which is a corticosteroid. This is used as an anti-inflammatory. It's also used as an anti-rejection medication for solid organ transplants. Folks that are on prednisone, and if any of you have been on prednisone, you know it's kind of a nasty medication. It causes a ravenous appetite. Oftentimes we see weight gain, water retention. So we'll want to talk to our patients that are on this medication about following a lower sodium diet to decrease that fluid retention. And then also long-term use of prednisone can affect bone health. So we'll want to make sure they're getting adequate calcium and vitamin D. Always a good idea, like we talked about in chapter 4, to ask clients about their herbal supplements that they're taking because there's certain ones that can impact their medications. Now, the most important diet-drug interaction is foods that are high in tyramine and their interaction with a class of medication called MAO inhibitors. Okay, so MAO inhibitors are a class of drugs that were prescribed for folks who have depression. And it is an older class of drugs, but there still are a good chunk of people on MAO inhibitors because they work for them and they don't want to switch to another medication. So if people that are taking MAO inhibitors for depression eat foods that are high in tyramine, it can cause a very high increase in blood pressure and can be fatal. So foods with a high tyramine content are usually aged cheeses, cured meats, beer, wine, soy sauce, prepared soy foods, any fermented vegetables. So we'll want to make sure that we talk with those patients who are on MAO inhibitors and the avoidance of these high tyramine foods. So now that we've looked at the clinical information from the medical record, we're going to want to get some subjective information from the client themselves. So there's several ways that we can do this. We can have the client do a 24-hour recall with us where we'd be asking them probing questions about their portion sizes, their food preparation methods, the beverages that they're drinking. We can have the clients fill out a food frequency questionnaire, or we can help them with that. And this is where we basically ask